Chapter 206. In order to ensure little Karen's safety, Kevin Kyle had hired someone to install surveillance cameras in the places where she often played. Moreover, they were directly connected to his mobile phone. Therefore, at this time, all the actions between the mother and daughter were witnessed by Kevin Kyle. He stared at them on the mobile phone screen. His eyes were gentle enough to melt the whole world, but there was also a sharpness that could turn the world upside down. The tenderness between the mother and daughter, snuggling up to each other on the screen, was emanating towards him. Although Karen Daly did not remember little Karen, her eyes were full of pity and love, as if she had never forgotten. This happiness was what they deserved, and the sharpness in Kevin's eyes was directed to those who robbed them of this happiness. Kevin Kyle smiled coldly. No matter who it was, he would make them pay the price for the memories that Karen Daly had lost. "Brother, what are you looking at?" Mia Kyle suddenly stretched out her head from behind Kevin Kyle and looked at his mobile phone. "You look silly." As soon as Mia Kyle finished speaking, she saw clearly who the person on Kevin Kyle's mobile phone was. She was so surprised that her eyes almost jumped out of their sockets. She was surprised for a long time before she spat out a few words. "Brother, she is sister-in-law." It was incredible. How could a person who had been dead for 3 years appear again? Could it be that Mia had seen a ghost in the daytime? Perhaps the person on the screen was not the Karen Daly from 3 years ago, but her cold brother could not forget Karen Daly. So perhaps he searched the whole world and found a substitute who looked the same as Karen did. Kevin Kyle put away his mobile phone, looked at Mia Kyle, and said in a low voice, "Don't be surprised. Sit down. I have something to say to you." "Brother, that's just someone who looks like sister-in-law. It's really not her, isn't it?" Mia Kyle still felt that finding a person who looked like Karen Daly was more believable than a sudden resurrection of Karen Daly, who was already dead. "She is your sister-in-law, but she doesn't remember us. Don't talk nonsense in front of her." Although the truth was very cruel, Kevin Kyle had to explain it to Mia Kyle, and so that she wouldn't scare Karen Daly away. "Brother, I know there is something wrong with your EQ, but are you sure your IQ is okay? How can you believe that a person who died 3 years ago can be resurrected?" Because Kevin Kyle cared too much about Karen Daly, Mia Kyle was a little worried that he would be tricked by someone else. "Be careful. Maybe she is just a woman who looks similar to my sister-in-law and claims that she can't remember the past, and take her as little Karen's mother." "She is Karen Daly," Kevin retorted. From the first time he saw her, Kevin Kyle was 100% sure that she was Karen Daly. Perhaps a lot of people would have the same thought as Mia did, thinking that someone with the intention to take advantage of his weakness would send a woman who looked just like Karen Daly to him. A person's face could be similar, but no one could imitate personality, the manner of speaking, and other little gestures. Now Karen Daly didn't remember what had happened in the past, but many of her actions were the same as before. There was no change at all. Her speaking voice was also extremely pleasant, which could not be imitated by others. "Brother, since you have little Karen here, perhaps you should think of a way to do a DNA test between them so that you can be rest assured," Mia suggested. Regarding this matter, Mia Kyle was an outsider, so she was being very rational. Something felt wrong with the sudden appearance of a person who had died 3 years ago. Although Mia Kyle had never seen Karen Daly's body, her father and grandfather had seen it. They would not lie to her. If the elders had not been lying, then this Karen Daly was very likely to be a fake. This fake Karen Daly who approached her brother must have an ulterior motive. Mia thought that she must help her brother, who had been hoodwinked by the fake Karen Daly. She thought she must help to uncover the truth. "I don't want to hear that anymore." After saying this coldly, Kevin Kyle stood up and left, leaving Mia Kyle behind. Looking at Kevin Kyle walk away and thinking of his expression when he watched the surveillance video on his mobile phone earlier, Mia Kyle knew that her silly brother had completely believed that the woman beside little Karen was his wife. In the past 3 years, apart from smiling at little Karen, he had never smiled at anyone else, and yet he could smile so gently when he looked at that Karen Daly on his mobile phone. Mia Kyle sighed. Her cold brother had never been close to a woman before. She didn't expect that he would fall into a woman's hands in the end. That scumbag Neil Brown was the opposite of her cold brother. Neil Brown could get along with anyone, but he chose to avoid Mia. In the past 3 years, she had pursued him many times, but when he saw her around, he would keep a straight face and ignore her, as if she owed him in her last life. However, it didn't matter. She had a new plan. By tomorrow, that news would blow up. She wanted to see if Neil Brown could still sit still by then. There was still some time today. To not let her cold brother be cheated by a doppelganger, Mia Kyle decided to test the woman, to see if that woman was really her sister-in-law or a random woman who had been sent by others. "Big Karen, I'll treat you to some strawberries. Is that okay?" Mia Kyle was about to take action when little Karen, who was holding Big Karen's hand, walked into the living room from the outside and bumped into Mia Kyle. Mia Kyle took little Karen over, glanced at Karen Daly inconspicuously, and said, "Karen, sweetheart, did you make a new friend?" Little Karen nodded vigorously and said, Little Aunt, this is my sister Big Karen. After little Karen introduced her, Karen Daly nodded politely and added, Hello, Miss Kyle. I'm Karen Daly. Mia Kyle looked at Karen Daly in a daze. They had the same name, the same voice, and the same appearance. Not to mention how her cold brother could not resist thinking so. Even Mia could not resist thinking that this actually was the real Karen Daly. Mia Kyle still remembered how Karen Daly always smiled so gently, and her voice was the same as it was now, which made people feel comfortable when speaking to her. Especially Karen Daly's calm temperament, Mia Kyle would never forget it. Whether she remembered the past or not, Karen Daly still gave people around her that familiar feeling, as if she had never left. After staring at Karen Daly for a long time, Mia Kyle went over and gave Karen Daly a big hug. Miss Daly, hello, my name is Mia Kyle. We will be friends from now on. You can call me Mia. Being suddenly hugged by Mia Kyle, Karen Daly was slightly stunned. She found that everyone in the Kyle family seemed to be very friendly. For starters, Kevin Kyle, she'd only met him once, but he actually took the initiative to reach out to the company to ask her to design a dress for his family of 3. She had met little Karen in the park once. Such a young child should have forgotten everything immediately after, but she actually remembered her. Now, even the little aunt who little Karen had mentioned had given Karen Daly a big hug the first time they met. Mia Kyle put little Karen into Karen Daly's arms again and said, Miss Daly, my brother left earlier, and I am in a hurry to go out to run some errands. It's rare for little Karen to like to play with someone else. Please accompany her today. Karen Daly. She had just come to the Kyle house to see the kid. Why did she seem to fall into a wolf's den now? But when she thought of how she was going to accompany little Karen for a day, she realized that she was very willing to do so. Chapter 207. The famous actress Polaris and the famous actor Xander Yu grew fond of each other after a film shoot. And on Xander Yu's birthday, the pair went back to Xander Yu's house together, staying the whole night. As soon as the news was released, the popularity of Polaris and Xander Yu's names rose again and again, and soon rose to the headlines of all major websites. Before the two actors came out to speak on this issue, the fans on both camps began to quarrel, claiming that it was the other party that wanted to steal the popularity of their idols. There were some rational fans who commented that these were their private lives. Everyone should not interfere too much and only wish the best for their idols. However, the rational fans' voices were too small, and soon they were suppressed. On the internet, it could be seen that the two camps of fans were at war with each other. Xander Yu received a call from his agent. Before he could speak, he was scolded by his agent. He had just become popular in the entertainment circle. At this time, he could be a couple with just anyone, but he couldn't let the news out that he had spent the night with someone. Xander Yu was also so anxious that he didn't even know how to explain, because he did bring Polaris back to his apartment. Although the two of them had not done anything inappropriate, no one would believe a single man and woman who had stayed in the same room for a whole night with nothing happening between them. At this time, Xander Yu was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan, while the actress, Polaris, was just lying on the sofa at home, eating fruits, browsing Twitter on her mobile phone, watching this fierce war like an outsider. She muttered as she scrolled, Neil Brown, keep on hiding from me. If you have the ability, hide from me for the rest of your life. In the photos that were posted online, the first one seemed to be of Xander Yu, who was kissing her, and the second one was Xander Yu on top of her and lay on the sofa, with half of her shoulders exposed. The third one and the fourth one were even worse. Looking at these photos, Mia Kyle couldn't help praising the photographer. The photos looked so real that even she could be deceived, especially when she saw the hate comments on her account. Mia Kyle couldn't help but register a fake account and join them to make a fuss for a while. Everyone cursed her. The worse it was, the better. She had been scolded so badly by the netizens, and she had been fucked by another man. Neil Brown would definitely not sit by and do nothing. Even if he wanted to sit back and do nothing, Mia Kyle would not let him do so. She had already told Jackie Ball to call Neil Brown when the matter was boiling over. However, she thought about it again and realized that Neil Brown was not an idiot. It was not easy for her to deceive him. She had to continue to play the game. The more vivid her acting was, the better it would be. The first thing she did was to turn her mobile phone to flight mode so that Neil Brown couldn't get through to her phone. If he couldn't get through to her phone, he would be anxious, and then he would definitely come over to see her. Secondly, she had to pretend to be miserable. First, she had to think of a way to make her eyes swollen and then look like a mess. The third thing was that she had to eat enough. Only when she was full could she have the strength to fight with this scumbag, Neil Brown. Mia Kyle first had a big meal, then messed up her hair and smeared something on her face. She tried to make herself look miserable as much as possible. After all the preparations, Mia Kyle turned around in front of the mirror and was very satisfied with her poor image. She took out her mobile phone and took a picture. She came out and looked at Jackie Ball, who was standing there silently. She poked him in the chest and said, Hey Jackie, if you continue to look at me with such a serious face, I will be unhappy. Polaris, once this news spreads out, Your reputation will be ruined, he exclaimed. Jackie Ball couldn't stop Mia Kyle's nonsense, so he protested silently. Don't worry about it. Call Neil Brown now, Mia replied. As long as she could catch up with Neil Brown, Mia Kyle would not care about her reputation. Yes, her reputation would be judged by others, and they could say whatever they liked. But her life was her own. Living with the person she liked was her main pursuit. Polaris. Jackie, you are on my side, so you have to listen to me, or I will make you leave the country. Mia Kyle punched him on the chest again. Your muscles are getting stronger and stronger. Jackie Ball blushed and said, I'm gonna make the phone call now. Mia Kyle was lying on the sofa, thinking about how worried Neil Brown would be for her. She couldn't help but smile. Neil Brown must like her. If he didn't like her, he wouldn't have been single for so many years. He was the only heir to the Brown family. Mia Kyle turned on her tablet again and went on Twitter again. The trending hashtags about her news were all gone. None of the top 50 hot searches were about her. She searched frantically, but there was no news about her and Xander Yu at all. All the news had been cleared up, leaving no trace behind. Not only did she feel that she was hallucinating, but also many netizens had the same thoughts. Mia Kyle was so angry that she wanted to hit somebody. She had spent a lot of time and energy to make such a big scene today. Her cold brother had suppressed this news again. He just needed to take care of his wife and child. Why did he have to take care of her affairs? Mia Kyle was so angry that she rolled from the sofa to the ground and shouted, Jackie Ball, I wanted you to inform Neil Brown about this. Who did you inform instead? Jackie Ball came in and said hesitantly, Polaris, I've called him, but he didn't say he wanted to see you. Mia Kyle said, honestly, what did he say? He said. Jackie Ball knew that this was too hurtful, but he didn't dare to lie. After thinking for a while, he said honestly, he said that your business has nothing to do with him. He told you not to bother him with anything in the future. My business has nothing to do with him? Mia Kyle was so angry that she threw her mobile phone on the ground. She turned around and went to the bathroom to clean up, then changed her clothes. Jackie Ball followed her and said, Polaris, where are you going? Don't mess around. I'm in a bad mood now. You'd better not follow me. Mia Kyle went to the underground garage and drove straight to the military base at Chatterton Town. If she didn't see Neil Brown today, she would not leave. The military base only allowed people in on military affairs, so nobody else could come in. Mia Kyle was stopped by a soldier before she got close to the gate. She was not afraid of being stopped. She needed someone to stop her, so that someone could pass on the message for her. She winked at the guard and said with a smile, Soldier brother, I'm your Captain Neil Brown's girlfriend. You just need to inform him so, and ask him to come out. Our captain's girlfriend often comes here, and we all know her. Don't pretend to be her. Just go now, and we'll pretend that we haven't seen you. What? Mia Kyle narrowed her eyes. Your captain's girlfriend often comes here? Who is your captain? Who is your captain's girlfriend? She swore that if this person dared to say that it was Neil Brown, she would beat him up. Chapter 208. There's only one captain in this military base. Who else could it be except for Neil Brown? Mia Kyle was more and more beautiful in recent years, but this soldier was not teased by her beauty, so he said to her seriously with a straight face. Then who is his girlfriend? Mia Kyle looked at the soldier, and her smile was as bright as a blooming flower. Of course, his girlfriend is our future madam. The soldier lowered his head and glanced at Mia Kyle. This woman was dressed flashily, and she was obviously a seductive woman. You are definitely not suitable to be our madam anyway. Before the soldier could finish his last word, his face was hit by a heavy punch. Mia Kyle attacked very quickly, and the soldier was unprepared. This punch hit him on the face, which almost made him scream out of pain. Little girl, do you know what you are doing? The soldier looked at Mia Kyle angrily, but he didn't dare to do anything to Mia Kyle. Although their captain didn't admit to her identity, everyone in the Chatterton Town military knew who Mia Kyle was. Mia Kyle would make a few phone calls to the military every day. No matter who had answered the phone, she would let the person tell Neil Brown that she liked him and wanted to marry him. This matter had long been known in the military and became a public secret. Everyone knew that their captain was being pursued by a little girl. As a matter of fact, Mia Kyle would not be able to make the calls if the captain asked some technicians to alter the settings. However, since their captain did not do so, it could be possible that he wanted to receive her calls. The attitude of their captain towards Mia Kyle affected what his subordinates thought of her. So even if she hit someone, the soldier did not dare to do anything to her. Mia Kyle could tolerate just anything, but she couldn't tolerate anyone saying that she couldn't be with Neil Brown. She couldn't vent her anger with just one punch. She threw another punch at the soldier's abdomen. The soldier covered his abdomen with his hand and said, "You." "What?" Mia Kyle hit him and took 2 steps back. She clapped her hands and said, "You had it coming." The soldier pointed at her angrily and said, "Don't think that I wouldn't dare arrest you." "Shouldn't you arrest me?" Mia Kyle arrogantly looked at the soldier, who had been beaten twice by her, and said, "I not only hindered your job, but also hit you. Are you going to let me go like this?" "I?" The soldier's face was swollen, and he was in a dilemma because of Mia Kyle's aggressive manner. He had been instructed by his superiors to say those words. But there was no real instruction to arrest someone in this situation, so he did not dare to make a decision by himself. "You won't arrest me, will you?" Mia Kyle took out her mobile phone and said with a smile, "I'll take a few photos and post them to the internet now. I want everyone to see that the soldiers of the military in Chatterton Town will tolerate people who bully them. How can they protect the country and people?" The soldier was furious. He was provoked by Mia Kyle's words. If he didn't take action, his military badge would be confiscated. Therefore, Mia Kyle was locked up in a place where criminals were held in the military. The room was dark and damp, which was far different from what she imagined. Mia Kyle squatted on a wooden plank on an iron bed frame. She looked over and nagged, "If I had known that the conditions here were so bad and there were so many stinky mice, I would have chosen another way to march into the military base." Now that she was locked up here, she didn't even know whether Neil Brown was aware of it. If he didn't know of this, she would be locked up in vain. No, she must let Neil Brown know that she is here and find a way to lure him over. Only when she sees him could she move on to the next step of her plan. Mia Kyle's mobile phone had been confiscated, and she couldn't send a message or make a call. She could only rely on her lion-like roars. She jumped off the iron bed frame, stood in front of the iron window, and shouted, "Neil Brown, I came to see you on purpose. Before I came here, I told my family that if something happened to me, they should ask you for me. Neil Brown, you said that I wouldn't eat you. Then why you hide from me all day? Neil Brown, are you deaf? Did you hear that? If you don't speak again, when I go out, I will definitely teach you a lesson. Neil Brown, I was bitten by a rat. I'm dying. Come and save me." Mia Kyle shouted at the top of her voice. It didn't take long for her throat to ache and her voice to be hoarse. "I can see that you're shouting so loudly and still in good spirits. You don't look like a dying person at all." When Mia Kyle was about to lose her breath, Neil Brown's voice rang in her ears. She looked over and saw him, in his military uniform, walking towards her. Neil Brown was about the same height as her cold brother, but he was in the military area all year round and had many assignments on duty. His skin was much darker, and he looked healthy and full of strength. Looking at the tall, strong, and handsome Neil Brown, Mia Kyle felt that she was salivating in anticipation. Just now, she had lost all her strength to shout. But at the sight of Neil Brown, Mia Kyle regained full strength energy, as if she had been injected with steroids. Mia Kyle said while jumping up and down, "Neil Brown, I know that you can't bear to let a powerless and beautiful girl like me spend the night here. If I stay here, you must feel very distressed in your heart." Neil Brown raised his eyebrows and looked at her. "I haven't seen you for a while, and couldn't notice that you have learned anything new, but you are more shameless now." Mia Kyle grinned and said, "That's because you're the one I like. In front of you, I have to be the most real version of myself." The words shameless had no effect on Mia Kyle. She knew she was thick-skinned. How could she chase after Neil Brown this way, if she was not shameless? Neil Brown asked, "So your most real self is when you're hitting people and stirring up trouble?" Mia Kyle said, "Don't talk about anything else now, Neil Brown. Open the shutter and let me out. There are so many mice and mosquitoes here, and I'm going to be bitten to death." Neil Brown asked, "Who said you could come out?" Mia Kyle said, "Didn't you come to pick me up?" Neil Brown said, "You caused trouble by yourself. Of course, you have to bear the consequences. I am just here to see if you are as miserable as you sound." Mia Kyle asked, "And then?" Neil Brown said, "Then you can play as you like." Mia Kyle said, "I want to play with you." Neil Brown said in a low voice, "The military base is for military affairs. Any intruder should be punished in accordance with the law, and no one can be an exception." Mia Kyle said, "Neil Brown, what do you want?" Neil Brown said, "This is what I want." After saying that, Neil Brown turned around and left. Chapter 209, Neil Brown, You Cannot Go. Mia Kyle reached out from the window to grab Neil Brown, but failed. Then she took off her shoes and threw them at Neil Brown, but failed again. She was so angry that she shouted, "Neil Brown, are you still a human? How could this bastard go so far?" He had already come and had already seen her locked up in such a cold and damp place. How could he ignore her and leave? "Neil Brown, if you don't get me out, I'll blow up your place." Mia Kyle was so angry that she kicked against the wall. Because she was too angry and did not notice that she had no shoes on, it was too late, and a large piece of flesh had been grazed off from her big toe. "Ah! It hurts." Mia Kyle screamed in pain. Her anguished scream didn't sound like she was pretending. Neil Brown paused for a moment and looked back at her. Mia Kyle gritted her teeth and was screaming in pain. When she saw Neil Brown looking at her, she knew that this was a turning point. She blinked her eyes, and big tears rolled down from her eyes. Her tears shed as if the whole world owed her. "Neil Brown, my foot is bleeding, but it doesn't matter. I deserve to be taught a lesson if I did something wrong. Otherwise, I will never learn to be sensible. You don't have to worry about me." "You're right, then you stay here." Neil Brown nodded and agreed that she was right. Then he turned around and left. "What?" Mia Kyle felt incredulous. Had she heard it wrong? But when she saw that Neil Brown was getting farther and farther away, she finally realized that Neil Brown left her alone and walked away. "Neil Brown, you bastard! Come back now! You hear me?" Mia Kyle jumped up in anger. If she had a grenade in her hand, she would throw it at him and blow him up. Her toe was bleeding, but he didn't feel sorry for her at all. He didn't care about her and wanted her to stay in this dark and damp place. Mia Kyle was so angry that she jumped and cursed. In the end, she had no strength to curse. She even fell asleep on the hard wooden bed. As she fell asleep in a daze, she was still cursing. "Stupid Neil Brown. You'd better not let me catch you. Otherwise, I'll peel off your skin, break your bones, drink your blood, eat your flesh." In her sleep, Mia Kyle also looked fierce. She said these through gritted teeth as if she hated Neil Brown to the bones. However, after a few seconds, her voice suddenly softened. "Neil Brown, why do you hide from me? Don't you know how much I like you?" Hearing Mia Kyle's words, the female doctor shook her head, gently held Mia Kyle's foot, and cleaned the wound on her foot with a sterilized cotton cloth. Mia Kyle was in a bad temper. That kick just now had been with great strength. Her foot was soft and fair. With this kick, a large piece of flesh on the big toe of her right foot had gone missing. Mia Kyle frowned because of the pain. But because she had used too much strength just now, she slept deeply. The doctor cleaned up the wound but didn't wake her up. After treating the wound, the doctor left and reported to Neil Brown, who was waiting outside the door. "Miss Kyle has a big piece of flesh missing from her right big toe. It must be painful, even as I helped her clean the wound. I didn't expect that such a delicate little girl like her wouldn't cry out in pain." "I see. Carry on with your other work, then." After the military doctor left, Neil Brown walked to the dark and damp room, and his eyes fell on Mia Kyle, who was lying on the dirty and hard wooden bed. She could adapt really well, given she could fall asleep on such a bed. After looking at her for a while, Neil Brown picked her up and carried her on his shoulder. Then he left the room with her. Mia Kyle woke up as soon as she was carried by Neil Brown on his shoulder. Actually, Mia Kyle had already woken up when Neil Brown came into the room. She quietly opened her eyes and looked around, and then closed them immediately. She pretended to be asleep and waited for him to take her out of the room. She knew that Neil Brown would be reluctant to part with her. There were few girls as beautiful as her in the world. Neil Brown was carrying Mia Kyle, like carrying a bag of goods without any pity. Mia Kyle was hanging upside down on his shoulder. As he walked, she put her face on his back and felt the warmth of his body. It felt so good. Just as Mia Kyle was still immersed in her beautiful fantasy, Neil Brown had already carried her to the suite where he lived in the military base. After entering the room, Neil Brown slammed the door and threw Mia Kyle on the sofa in the living room like throwing down a bag of goods. Then he turned back to the room, without looking at her. What if she had fallen off the sofa? Mia Kyle touched her butt, which ached in pain, and scolded silently, "Stinky Neil Brown, remember what you've done." When she finally gets him and becomes his wife, she would teach him a good lesson. After a while, the sound of running water came from the room. When Mia Kyle heard it, an idea came to her mind. She felt that a good opportunity was coming. It was such a good opportunity. If she did not act now, she would not forgive herself. Mia Kyle thought for a moment, gritted her teeth, and took off all her clothes. She didn't believe that he could control himself if she did this. Mia Kyle took off her clothes really quickly. Then she trotted to the bathroom in the room. The bathroom door was not closed, and Mia Kyle could vaguely see the figure moving around in the bathroom. However, no matter how bold she was and how wild she was still a girl after all. She had never done anything like this before. At this moment, she still felt a little nervous and shy. She took a deep breath and clenched her fists. After standing for a long time, she plucked up the courage to kick the door open. When the door opened, Mia Kyle looked over and saw Neil Brown taking a shower. The water splashed on his naked and strong body, forming a very beautiful picture. Mia Kyle was stunned for a moment and did not know what to do next. Neil Brown looked back at her. It was just a glance, and then he turned around to wash as if Mia Kyle was transparent to him. Mia Kyle felt that it was an absolute insult. She was standing in front of him, wearing nothing. But he acted like he didn't see anything. He acted like he didn't see anything. But he must have already seen everything. While naked, he looked a little different from what she imagined, but she did not care much about this. Her purpose was to throw herself at him. Mia Kyle took a few steps forward and held him tightly from the back, with her soft body clinging to his back. Chapter 210. Mia Kyle made up her mind to seize this opportunity. She would first throw herself at Neil Brown. After everything happened, she would see if he could deny their relationship. She tightly wrapped her arms around his sturdy waist and said arrogantly, "Neil Brown, you can't escape this time." However, before Mia Kyle finished her words, Neil Brown pulled her hand away and picked her up. It was not easy for Mia Kyle to admit defeat. She reached out her hand and grabbed Neil Brown's arm. "Neil Brown, I'm already naked. If you don't touch me, I'll suspect that you have something wrong with you." "It's my business if there's something wrong with me." Neil Brown lifted Mia Kyle up like a doll. "If you grow up and have physical needs, you can find a man who is willing to play with you." After that, Neil Brown threw Mia Kyle out mercilessly. Bang! Mia Kyle fell on the hard wooden floor. With a bang, it hurt so much that her whole body almost fell apart. Neil Brown, you... Mia Kyle was so hurt that she had no strength to curse. She curled up and rolled on the ground twice. Neil Brown, you bastard! Aren't you afraid that I will really go find another man? Neil Brown said, that's really your own choice. Hearing what Neil Brown said, Mia Kyle grabbed something and threw it at the bathroom door. Neil Brown, screw you! She couldn't believe that he had no affection for her at all. If he really hadn't, he wouldn't have waited until now and still not have a girlfriend. Mia Kyle was so angry that she stamped her foot and accidentally kicked her injured foot, which made her cry out in pain. You asked for the pain. After taking his shower, Neil Brown wrapped himself in a bath towel and walked out of the bathroom. He said while walking, put on your clothes and leave on your own, or I throw you out naked. Choose one. Mia Kyle curled up into a ball and did not speak or move. She cursed him again and again in her heart. This disgusting man was so cruel to her. Today she had been locked up, injured, and even thrown out by him. She had suffered so much. How could she let this go so easily? Do you want me to throw you out now? Neil asked, but Mia Kyle didn't answer. Neil Brown glanced at her. He didn't want to give her any face. Mia Kyle got up from the ground and pursed her lips. She glanced at Neil Brown and turned her head away, pretending to look very pitiful. Neil Brown, I only like you. You don't have to humiliate me like this. She seemed to be crying, but she was very arrogant in her heart. Humph, Neil Brown, I'll let you enjoy my acting, she thought. Stop acting. Your pitiful look doesn't work in front of me. Neil Brown unceremoniously exposed her disguise. Acting? Who's acting? Mia Kyle gritted her teeth in anger. In the past, her acting skills were not as good as they were now, but he had believed whatever she said. Now her acting skills had improved, and the roles she acted in were more in-depth. But Neil Brown was unwilling to believe her words. He was no longer willing to coax her carefully, and it seemed that he would no longer treat her tenderly. Thinking of this, Mia Kyle's face suddenly darkened. He might think she was a shameless girl who could easily take off her clothes in front of a man. It was not that she was shameless, but that she really liked him too much. She liked him so much that as long as he smiled at her, she was willing to give up everything and go with him. She had been pestering him and chasing him in her own way, but it seemed that this method was not effective. The more she chased, the farther he seemed to be. Mia Kyle didn't like this feeling at all. Therefore, she was trying hard to get Neil Brown and make him her man as soon as possible. Then no one would dare rob him from her. Since you think I'm acting, then take it as if I'm acting. Mia Kyle sniffed, and tears rolled down from her eyes. She quickly wiped them away, as if she didn't want Neil Brown to see her cry. In the past, she had cried with a purpose, and deliberately cried for him to see. Today, she had to hide her tears and avoid being seen by him. It seemed that she was not acting, but was really upset. Neil Brown went out to pick up her clothes and handed them to her, saying, Don't cry. Put on your clothes. I'll send you back. Mia Kyle seized the opportunity. She hooked her arms around Neil Brown's neck and kissed him hard. Neil Brown was slightly stunned, and his lips were suddenly bitten by her. She bit on his lips and sucked at his blood, as if she was taking revenge on him in this way. Looking at her angry face, Neil Brown intended to push her hand away, but he stopped. Instead, he moved his hand to hold her waist and lifted her up a little so that it would be more convenient for her to bite him. It was not enough just to bite him. Mia Kyle stretched out her hand and drew blood on his back. Only then did she let go of him with satisfaction. Neil Brown said, Put on your clothes and I'll take you back. Mia Kyle said proudly, No, I won't. Neil Brown calmly changed his clothes in front of her. He put on a coat and was ready to go out. Mia Kyle held him back and asked, I'm here. Where are you going? Neil Brown said, It's because you're here that I'm leaving. Where else can you go at such a late hour? Mia Kyle was just about to ask when suddenly there was a knock on the door. Neil, dinner is ready. A gentle female voice came from outside the door. Hearing her words, Mia Kyle's body froze. Does Neil Brown really have a girlfriend? She thought. Neil Brown glanced at Mia Kyle, opened the door, and went out. He slammed the door and left Mia Kyle alone in the room. Mia Kyle wanted to chase him to see who the vixen was, but she didn't have anything on her body. When she got dressed and went out, the corridor was empty. She didn't know where Neil Brown and that woman had gone. Come out, Neil Brown, she shouted in the corridor, but she didn't get any reply. He had left with a woman. He wasn't joking with her. Mia Kyle slowly realized this. She had always thought that the reason why Neil Brown avoided her was because of the complicated relationship between the two of them. But now it seemed that it was not the case. Today, she heard from the guards that Neil Brown had a girlfriend, but Mia Kyle didn't believe it at all. But now, she heard with her own ears that there was a woman who came looking for him, and she called him with such intimacy. It was late at night, and he left with a woman. Where else could he have gone? With her usual temper, she would knock on the doors of the whole building until Neil Brown was found. However, the long day, Mia Kyle was also tired and had no energy to fight with him. But she would not give up easily. If she couldn't do it this time, then she would do it next time. She was willing to spend a few more years on her pursuit of Neil Brown.